Okay, so I'm Pete, and this is my LPE video. So we'll just start out talking about, we're going to head up on the Lone Peak Tram, and it's going to take us up to 11,166 feet. And anytime you get up that high in the mountains, you need to start using terms like cirque and arête and horn, so that you sound like you know what you're talking about, if nothing else. So that first word, cirque, we'll be driving into one. It's anytime you have a concave feature on a mountain that's been eroded away by glaciers, you can call that a cirque. And on Lone Peak here, we still have a remnants of a glacier, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So when you talk about an arête, that would be two glaciers eroding away what looks like a fin, a ridge line. And that certainly is going to be the case here as we drive up. We can look at this south-facing ski terrain we call the A to Z chutes, and on the other side, the north-facing would be referred to as the headwaters. And when we talk about a horn, we talk about three or more arêtes that form a prominent peak. Anytime you have that, you can call it a horn. The most famous one, notably, would be the Matterhorn. So those are some fancy mountaineering terms we can throw out, but to direct your attention back to that arête on the south-facing terrain here of the A to Z chutes, as you look up that ridge line or that arête, start looking for mountain goats. And how you do that is if you see a little white speck that you think is snow, and that snow starts to move and maybe walk away, then you probably have got yourself a mountain goat in view. Big Sky and the skiers of Big Sky have got a real symbiotic relationship going on with these mountain goats, in that mountain goats have a couple of primary food sources. So one of the food sources is, just if we look at these rocks here today, we can notice some of the neon green, kind of beautiful neon green coloring, and that's just lichen on the rocks. And these goats get between 100 to 300 pounds just by licking the lichen off those rocks. And I mentioned that symbiotic relationship between the skiers and the goats, and that really comes from as skiers hike. And it's normally, we're going to find it on this ridge line here. The skiers hike out, and sure enough, when you're hiking and working up a good sweat, you might have to urinate. And when you do, your human urine has a ton of salt in it. That would be the other component of a goat's diet. So oftentimes, I'm hiking that ridge line in the winter, just tickled pink to see if a mountain goat is licking one of my urine cakes that I deposited previous days. Makes you feel great. But anyway, so there are two primary food sources. The larger goats you're going to see are the males. They're called billies. A lot of times you'll see them alone. When you see the goat herds, a lot of times that's females, or they're called nannies. And then if you don't know what a mountain goat kids, that their kids' names are, it's pretty difficult. They're called kids. So there you go. Nannies will normally hang out with groups of other nannies raising their kids together. So that's when you're going to see herds. Those are normally the females, and the nannies and the kids, they're going to be a little bit on the smaller side. But we will see goat herds around Lone Peak in the vicinity of about 20 or so goats, and that's certainly not uncommon. So as we pull into the tram dock here, maybe we can talk a little bit about the tram. It was built in 1995. Goes up 1,450 vertical feet. It's actually, as we talked about this cirque that we're in, it was formed by a glacier. We talked about how the glacier still remains underneath us. So this is kind of a moving structure. This bottom terminal is a moving structure, and it was designed that way. And we talked about kind of how the rocks have a viscous form. They look like they're flowing downhill, and that's because the ice that's mixed in with these rocks is still, it's still a glacier, and it's still flowing downhill. And pretty much through design, this bottom terminal has passive thermal probes that go into the ground that keep the heat that the bottom terminal generates from melting the glacier that it's on. Thus, you don't get too much movement all at once, but it has been moving, and as we ride up Lone Peak today, we'll hopefully not feel any of that movement, and we shouldn't. Well, that's over 5 minutes, and all I talked about was goats and the tram a little bit, so I guess that's it. Okay.